something a little different today from some of my usual content, or more regular content, or whatever. I just do whatever I want. I'm going to read a bit of Hunter S. Thompson's collection, Generation of Swine. It's just a collection of articles, writings, etc., etc. I've read so far 12 pages. I'm just going to read it out, just give kind of, just like do a kind of literary analysis, or kind of like first thoughts thing, I suppose. So, the Hellfire Club. How long, O Lord, how long are these TV presenters all degenerates? Are they wallowing and whooping with harlots whenever they're not on camera? Are they all thieves and charlatans and whoremongers? Another of those shameless buggers got whacked last week. Jimmy Swaggart, a 52-year-old howler from Baton Rouge, known in some quarters as the Mick Jagger of TV evangelism, got nailed in a nasty little sting operation down in New Orleans and was forced to resign his $145 million a year ministry for the same kind of sex crimes that his old rival Jim Bakker got busted for last year. Those were, in fact, who said it was. There were those, in fact, who said it was Swaggart himself who hatched the plot to disgrace Bakker and have him labelled for life as a brutal sodomite and a flagrant embezzler with a dope fiend for a wife and the IRS for a new partner instead of Jesus. Then Swaggart, crazed by hubris, tried to take out yet another of his rivals, Preacher Gorman from New Orleans, by calling him a sot, a pervert, and a dangerous child molester who couldn't help himself. So it was Gorman who turned up last week, in possession of a set of malicious photographs of Big Jim slinking into one of those third-rate romance, low-rent rendezvous style motels with a known prostitute, or at least a woman of ill repute. It reminded a lot of people of the naked lunacy that blew Gary Hart out of the '88 presidential race. It was a shame, they said, but you know how these people are. The semen finally backs up into the brain, the eyes get too bright, and the synapses start fusing into each other. Instead of secret love nests, they begin strutting into the Holiday Inn and going to orgies on the outskirts of town. Not much has changed with these powermongers since Caligula's time. Sex and power have a long history of feeding on each other. In 18th century England, the king and half his ministers were involved in a whole network of strange and violent sex clubs, whipping parlours and half-secret cults that embraced everything from Satanism and human sacrifice to flagrant white slavery and public bestiality. In the early years of the century, there were a large number of rakes clubs in London, where the high point of most evening was hitting the streets in a drunken, brainless frenzy and raping, beating and maiming every human being they could get their hands on. Bargo Partridge, in his classic History of Orgies, said, "The bucks and gallants roamed the seat, terrifying the elderly, building up the watch, breaking windows, committing rape and sometimes even murder. Young girls were stood on their head in the gutter, and elderly ladies popped into barrels and sent rolling down hills. There were clubs called the Mohawks and the Mankillers, which tried to outdo each other in the hideous game called Tipping the Lion. This consisted in crushing the nose and simultaneously gorging out the eyes of the victims unfortunate enough to be waylaid by them. They also carried a piece of apparatus for distending mouths and slitting ears. These were not lower-class thugs, as in Clockwork Orange, but the sons of the aristocracy. There was no law for them. Only the rich and powerful were allowed to carry swords or ride horses, which put the poor at a certain disadvantage when gangs of rich drunkards swooped down on them in some dim light street after midnight. That was the golden age of what they used to call gentlemen's clubs in London. But it couldn't last. There were too many losers wandering around with their noses crushed, their eyes gorged out, and their mouths so stretched that they could take in a whole cantaloupe and still make idle conversation in a pub. Public opinion turned on the wild boys, and the clubs were banished. By the second half of the century, there was a whole new focus for the gentlemen's clubs, the worship of sex and extravagant public decadence. This was the time of the infamous Hellfire Club, which included amongst its inner circle the Prince of Wales, the Lord Mayor of London, Benjamin Franklin, the crazed Earl of Sandwich, the monstrous Earl of Bute, the Prime Minister of England. These people didn't fool around. They raised the orgy to an art form unknown since Caligula, or even the fiendish Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. who begat a long line of rapists and treacherous sex maniacs who were said to lament the fact that the human body had so few orifices to penetrate. They were forced to create new ones, their own daggers, in order that the whole clan could swarm on a victim at once. Dilettantes like Hart, Backer and Swaggart could have turned away at the door of the Hellfire Club, rejected as humorless churls and cheap masturbators. Their only crimes, after all, have involved low rumours and innuendo and being seen in public with sluts and half-naked bimbos. The Earl of Sandwich would have taken great pride in being accused of these things. He was so constantly involved in orgies that he had little time for his duties, which included running the British Navy and entertaining the Empire on 5 oceans. And one of his main accomplishments during that time, in addition to inventing the sandwich, was to sell off the Hawaiian Islands, which cost England control of the whole Pacific Ocean for the next 200 years. King George III, meanwhile, was so crazed of his own warped fancy that he had little time to deal with a nasty little colonial insurrection that would come to be called the American Revolution. These were no amateur degenerates like the ones we sneer at today. They put the whole British Empire on the road to ruin and thought nothing of it, nor cared for that matter. One of the famous English navigator, Captain Cook, sent word back to London that he had Hawaii and all of Polynesia in the palm of his hand. If only Sandwich would authorise a new mast for his crippled faction. The Earl ignored the request. A few weeks later, Captain Cook was murdered by angry natives, but Sandwich never noticed. So much for the Empire. These boys liked their orgies, and nothing was going to interfere. These were giants. They had standards. Not like these whimpering mashers who keep fouling our headlines today. Maybe Alphonse Carr was wrong. It's pretty. It's only 3 pages. It's like, well, yeah, it's just a 3-page article, but some pretty obviously heavily charged stuff in there. But the Hellfire stuff's quite interesting. I've heard of the Hellfire Club before. It's kind of elite. It's kind of like elite sex groups and stuff like that. Spend enough time on the internet, obviously you're going to hear about all that stuff. Well, not even just the internet now, and the news in general, about how there is often with politics you have sex scandals and all the rest of it. It's interesting. It's kind of interesting the way that Hunter S. Thompson's weaving together different worlds and different times and places. So I like that. I should probably read some more, but I'll leave that another time. I don't want to read a whole book and then I'm just giving like a first impression of. I have read, like I said, I've read some of this before, a few pages of it. Yeah, it's a great book. This Hunter S. Thompson, Generation of Swine, Tales of Shame and Degradation in the 80s. I'll just read the back. Hunter S. Thompson, celebrated author of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, wrote a weekly column for the San Francisco Examiner for 2 years. These columns are collected here to offer a chronicle of adventures of a generation of swine. The incomparable Dr. Gonzo has journeyed no small distance in search of intelligent life and reports back. Instead, on the demented state of current events, he keeps tabs on the 1980 presidential race, quotes from the Bible, reference books and hotel rooms are supplied exclusively by the Gideons, and that's why the president appears to be 128 years old. Most smart people tend to feel queasy when the conversation turns to things like certain death and total failure and the idea of a doomed generation, but not me. I'm comfortable with these themes. I love that quote. I guess it's kind of comparable. Well, we're not doomed. It might feel like it now, but I don't think we're completely doomed. We've got to try and seek some kind of like candle of hope alive. And the situation's not so bad at the minute, but anyway, we'll end on too negative a note. I found that very interesting. disturbing at the same time, but interesting nonetheless.